So imagine your life as a map, like laid out right there in front of you on a table.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right. And when we sit down to plot our course on that map, the natural instinct for pretty much everyone is to draw a line that just goes straight up.
Oh, absolutely. Like you want the better job title, the bigger house, more money.
Exactly. It's just fundamentally human to want to climb to the highest peak available.
Mm.
But what if the only way to actually reach your ultimate potential, like the absolute peak of what you're capable of handling, is a deliberate, agonizing journey straight down to rock bottom?
I mean, that completely inverts everything we're taught about progress, you know?
Right.
We are conditioned from childhood to view any downward movement as a total failure. I mean, losing a job, losing money, losing influence, these are the things we spend our entire lives terrified of.
Yeah, we just assume up is the only acceptable direction.
Exactly. But the framework we're looking at today poses this really terrifying question, which is, what if going down is actually the mandatory prerequisite for any real growth?
And that is the core mystery we are exploring in this deep dive. We're unpacking a really fascinating lecture from a religious speaker who is completely re-examining the book of Genesis.
It's a really unique take on it.
It really is. But I do want to pause here for a quick disclaimer. The material we're looking at today is rooted in a specific theological perspective. And as your guides on this deep dive, we are not here to take sides.
Right. Definitely not endorsing these specific religious viewpoints or, telling anyone what to believe.
Exactly. Our mission is just to impartially unpack the incredible psychological and philosophical frameworks this speaker presents. He talks a lot about hardship, success, and the human ego.
Yeah.
Because whether you're deeply religious or a complete atheist, the psychological architecture he builds is, well, it's undeniably profound.
The psychology of it is staggering, honestly. He takes these ancient, culturally distant texts and he interprets them not as history lessons, but as this visceral blueprint for modern human resilience.
Yeah, it's very practical.
It is. He's looking at the fundamental mechanics of how a human being actually becomes capable of handling success without just being destroyed by it.
So let's jump right into how he sets this up, because he starts by completely redefining the geography of these ancient stories.
Right, specifically focusing on Abraham.
Yeah, the biblical figure of Abraham. But he insists we shouldn't read this as a past tense story about, a physical nomad wandering across a desert.
No, not at all.
He argues that the journey from a place called Ur of the Chaldeans down to Haran and finally to Shechem in Canaan is actually a metaphor for a brutal, systematic descent in social status.
And the way he translates those ancient cities into modern socioeconomic terms is so clever because it lets you actually feel the weight of the journey.
Oh, the apartment analogy.
Yes. He likens Ur, which is the starting point of the story, to the absolute peak of modern society. He asks the audience to imagine living in a luxurious 60 pyong apartment.
Which is massive, right?
Huge, a sprawling living space in the incredibly wealthy Gangnam district of Seoul. So you have the status, the wealth, the comfort. You are at the very top of the social hierarchy.
You're the person everyone else is looking up to. But then the movement begins, and the speaker points out that moving from that metaphorical Gangnam apartment to Haran and eventually down to Canaan, it isn't some lateral career move.
No, it's a severe demotion.
Right. You start in the penthouse, but then something goes wrong, like a business fails or a scandal hits, and you're forced to pack up and move to the suburbs.
In his modern analogy, it's like moving from Gangnam out to a satellite city like Anyang.
Yeah. And then things just keep getting worse. You lose more ground, your savings dry up, and you're pushed further out to a place like Gunpo.
And the descent just does not stop until you end up in this tiny, dilapidated room that rents for 30,000 won a month.
Which is what, roughly 25 US dollars?
Yeah, about $25 a month. Think about the psychological toll of that. It isn't just about losing the square footage or the nice zip code. It's about the daily grinding humiliation of downward mobility.
Oh, for sure.
It's that feeling of running out of rungs on the ladder and having absolutely nowhere left to fall. You've reached the absolute bottom of the societal barrel, and your ego is just being scraped raw every single day you wake up in that $25 room.
And here is where he introduces this radical reframing of a core concept. He brings up the word Emmanuel, which translates to God with us.
Right.
Now, usually if someone says the universe is with me or God is with me, they mean they just got a promotion or they closed on that massive Gangnam apartment.
They totally equate divine favor with upward mobility.
Exactly. But the speaker flips that entirely. He argues that Emmanuel's the universe, or God, walking with you on this agonizing path downward.
It's such a challenging concept, you know. It suggests that if you're losing your status, watching your wealth evaporate, feeling your comfort stripped away, you are not being abandoned by the universe.
It's actually the exact opposite.
Right. You are being actively accompanied into the necessary depths. The demotion is not an accident, it's deliberate.
It's like a reverse corporate ladder. Instead of climbing to the penthouse suite, you are being deliberately demoted to the basement. You lose the corner office, then the cubicle, and eventually you're working out of a damp janitor's closet.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
But that brings up the most important question. Why? I mean, why would the natural order of things, or any deity for that matter, deliberately push a human being down into the basement? What possible purpose does that downward trajectory serve?
Well, the speaker's answer is that ultimate capability requires the ego to be completely shattered. The universe is basically acting as a very harsh teacher, and the curriculum is suffering. He points out that an inflated ego is the single biggest barrier to actually understanding the world, or even being of use to anyone. As long as you think you're the center of the universe in your Gangnam apartment, you're fundamentally fragile.
And he illustrates that fragility with a really stark contrast. He talks about these quote-unquote book-smart kids.
Right, the ones who have only ever experienced the pristine, perfectly controlled environment of a classroom.
Yeah, they get the perfect grades, they have the perfect tutors.
Yeah.
But if they simply miss a bus on a rainy day, they completely freeze up.
They just panic.
Exactly. They don't know how to function because their environment has always been perfectly curated to support their ego and their comfort.
Now, compare that curated fragility to the way elite athletes are trained.
Oh, this is a great point.
If you watch Olympic-level athletes train, they are brutally pushed to their absolute physical and mental limits.
Yeah.
They are knocked down repeatedly.
Yeah, exhausted to the point where, as the speaker notes, their own mothers can't even bear to watch the training sessions because it just looks so cruel.
But that physical and mental breaking down is the only known mechanism to build the immense capacity required to win. He even references these older Japanese educational philosophies where parents would deliberately send their children away from the comforts of home.
Like specifically to experience rigorous suffering.
Right, exactly, to build an unbreakable internal resilience.
And the lecture really drives this home with an incredibly intense story about North Korean defectors making kimchi.
Yes. The kimchi anecdote.
Now, making kimchi is usually this refined cultural process with specific recipes and careful preparation. But these defectors described making it in a literal dirt hole.
Literally just a hole in the dirt.
Yeah. They took 1,500 raw cabbages, threw them directly into this dirt pit, tossed in unrefined salt, and just buried it.
Unbelievable.
And later, they would dig up this fermented cabbage, wash the dirt off, and eat it with nothing but the cloudy, starchy water left over from boiling rice. Just cabbage, dirt, raw salt, and rice water.
And the psychological recalibration there is profound. The speaker points out that because these individuals have tasted the ultimate foundational bitterness of life, their baseline for survival has been permanently altered.
They just never complain about the quality of modern food?
Never. If a side dish at a restaurant is slightly too salty or the presentation isn't aesthetically pleasing, it doesn't even register as a problem for them.
Right.
They have a baseline of survival that makes everyday ego-driven complaints seem utterly ridiculous. The speaker emphasizes that you cannot truly understand the reality of human existence until you have, quote, eaten bread soaked in tears or had to physically clean up someone else's bodily fluids.
Wow.
You have to touch the absolute base elements of human struggle to burn away your entitlement.
Okay, I have to put the brakes on for a second here because there is a very thin line we're walking.
What do you mean?
Well, isn't there a severe danger of just glorifying trauma? Like, it sounds dangerously close to saying that suffering is the only way to learn and that we should romanticize misery.
I see what you're saying.
Because, I mean, people go through horrific things that don't make them stronger at all. Those things just break them.
Oh, great.
So how do we distinguish between meaningless trauma and this so-called hardship training?
That distinction is actually the entire crux of the argument. Meaningless suffering just damages you. But what the speaker is talking about is suffering that specifically targets the ego.
Okay, that makes sense.
He isn't saying we should seek out trauma for the thrill of it, or that all trauma is inherently good. He's pointing out that when our ego is intact, we resist reality. We demand the world cater to us.
So the hardship acts as a corrective measure.
Exactly. The suffering he describes, the downward mobility, the loss of status, it acts as a solvent. It dissolves the ego so that you stop fighting reality and start accepting it. And the speaker doesn't just present this as an abstract academic theory either.
No, he really doesn't. He actually validates this entire philosophy through his own lived experience.
Right.
The lecture takes a massive turn at this point, moving away from the biblical metaphors and the defectors, and goes into a deeply personal narrative. We basically enter what feels like a 20-year chrysalis in the basement.
Yeah, he speaks with total authority on hitting rock bottom because he spent 2 decades living there.
2 decades. That's so long.
For 20 years, he lived in extreme poverty. He was the one living in those cheap 30,000 to 40,001 rooms. He ate whatever scraps were available.
Yeah.
But the most crucial element of those 20 years wasn't just the physical poverty, it was the internal surrender.
What do you mean by internal surrender?
He completely gave up on the idea of traditional success. The burning ambition to climb back up to a respectable societal position finally just burned out. He accepted his reality at the bottom.
Man, 20 years is an agonizingly long time to just sit in what the world calls failure.
Yeah.
That is over 7,000 days of waking up and feeling like you were falling behind.
It really is.
But then there's this incredible turning point. It happens during the Chuseok holiday, which is a major harvest festival in Korea.
Right.
A wealthy businessman was indiscriminately handing out relief boxes to small, impoverished churches.
Mm-hmm.
And the speaker receives one of these boxes. Now, you would normally expect a box like this to contain canned food or maybe some basic toiletries. Right?
Yeah, just basic survival goods.
Exactly. But instead, he opens it up. And inside is this massive, incredibly dense theological commentary on the book of Romans by a famous scholar named Martin Lloyd-Jones.
The juxtaposition is almost absurd.
Right.
You have this profoundly high-level academic text sitting in the middle of a dilapidated $25 a month room. And the story gets even more interesting, actually.
Oh, yeah, the visiting pastor.
Yes, a visiting pastor happens to stop by and sees this heavy theological commentary sitting in this dirt-poor setting. The pastor is shocked. He actually offers to buy the book from the speaker right then and there.
And the speaker takes the money, but he doesn't use it to pay off back rent or buy a month's worth of groceries.
No, he doesn't.
He takes that money and uses it to take his wife out for a proper meal.
Yeah.
It was the first time he had been able to afford a real dinner date since they were initially courting.
It is such a beautifully human moment in the middle of all this heavy theology.
It really is.
But the real revelation, the moment that unlocks this entire framework, happens at that dinner table. While they're eating, his wife looks at their life. She looks at the 2 decades of grinding poverty, the isolation, the failure.
And what does she say?
She tells him, if we had been successful, if we had been busy living the fast-paced life in the city, managing a thriving career and a busy social calendar, you never would have had the time or the forced isolation to sit down and actually read and understand such complex foundational texts.
Oh, wow. That realization completely flips the narrative of his entire adult life.
Totally.
When I was reading that in the material, I kept thinking about the biological process of a chrysalis. We always use the caterpillar turning into a butterfly as this gentle metaphor for change. We think of the cocoon as a cozy resting place.
Right, like it's just taking a nap.
Exactly. But biologically, the caterpillar isn't resting. When it goes into the chrysalis, it literally dissolves into a soup.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
It has to completely break down its existing form before it can reassemble into something with wings. Those 20 years of poverty were a forced incubator. He had to be isolated in that basement. His ego had to be dissolved into soup so he could actually digest the heavy material that would eventually define his life's work.
The forced incubator is the perfect way to describe it. The descent wasn't a punishment for doing something wrong. It was the exact preparation he needed.
Because it cleared everything else out.
Yes, the isolation stripped away all the distractions of the ego. And this deeply personal realization sets the stage perfectly for the climax of the entire lecture. He takes his own 20-year struggle, takes the concept of the dissolved ego, and connects it back to the story of Abraham to reveal the ultimate lesson about human desire.
So we return to Abraham, and the circumstances are bleak. He's now 99 years old.
99.
Yeah. He has spent his entire adult life desiring an heir. He spent decades trying to force the outcome his own way. He tried using a servant, he tried through relatives, he tried every human workaround he could think of to get what he wanted.
And every single attempt failed.
Every single one.
Yeah.
Now, at 99, he has finally accepted his rock-bottom reality. He has completely surrendered the desperate striving for the one thing he felt he was owed.
His ego has been entirely evacuated, and the speaker sets a remarkably visceral scene to illustrate the exact moment the universe finally responds to this state of total emptiness.
Oh, the desert scene.
Yes, it is the middle of the day in the desert. It is scorching hot. The speaker compares this oppressive heat to the water that is just starting to hiss and bubble right before you dunk a live chicken in to boil it.
That sounds miserable.
It's suffocating, miserable, blinding heat. The only thing any sane person would do is hide in the shade and conserve energy.
Right. But in the middle of this boiling heat, 3 dusty strangers appear on the horizon. Now, think back to who Abraham used to be. He was the guy who started out in the metaphorical Gangnam apartment.
Right, he was at the top of the food chain.
Exactly. A guy with that kind of status, seeing 3 unknown, impoverished travelers, would normally ignore them entirely. Or, at best, he might send a lowly servant out to toss them some scraps of food. But what does 99-year-old Abraham do? He actually runs to them.
He doesn't just offer a polite greeting either. He humbles himself completely. He bows to the ground. He refers to himself as their servant.
Wow.
He begs them not to pass by his tent without resting. He runs to his herd to pick out the absolute best calf he has, asks his wife to bake fresh bread, and then he stands there and personally waits on them while they eat under the tree.
Why does he do this? Why run out into boiling heat to serve nobodies?
Well, the speaker argues it's precisely because Abraham had endured decades of being pushed down and stripped of his own plans. He had lost his arrogance.
He didn't see himself as above them anymore.
Exactly. He no longer saw himself as superior to anyone. The long descent had dissolved his ego so completely that he saw the lowest, dustiest travelers as worthy of the highest level of service he could possibly offer.
It's the ultimate manifestation of the emptied cup. He has been drained of his own desires, his own pride, and his own timeline.
And the defining paradox of this entire framework is that it is only at this exact moment, the moment of total humility, when he becomes a willing servant to strangers without expecting a single thing in return, that the visitors announce the impossible.
That's when they tell him about his son.
Yes. They tell him that by this time next year, his wife will have a son. The son, Isaac, whose name actually translates to laughter.
So if we pull all this together, what does this actually tell us about the human experience? The decades of descending, the failures, the waiting, it wasn't just random bad luck.
No, he's entirely necessary.
If Abraham had gotten his wish at age 75, when he first set out, he would have been an arrogant master. He would have raised an heir from a place of unearned pride. He had to be broken down. He had to become a servant to strangers before he was psychologically and spiritually ready to handle the immense gift he'd been asking for.
The capability to handle true success without it corrupting you only arrives after the ego has been dismantled.
That makes a lot of sense.
The speaker actually notes a parallel to another ancient story about a woman who served a prophet, providing him a room and food, and expected absolutely nothing in return. The pattern is incredibly consistent.
Yeah, it really is.
It's only when you are finally content to just serve, when you have stopped striving and demanding that the universe cater to your timeline, that the universe finally turns around and asks, what do you want?
It is the ultimate paradox of surrender. You only get the prize when you genuinely no longer need it to validate your existence. Think about how we live today. We spend our entire lives begging the universe to give us things.
We really do.
We beg for the promotion, the wealth, the metaphorical sun, the massive apartment at the top of the city. We think we're ready for it. But this perspective suggests the universe is actually just waiting for us to hit the point where our grip finally loosens.
Right. It's waiting for us to look around at our meager surroundings, our failed plans, and say, I am content with nothing. I'm ready to serve.
True readiness is the absence of ego. It comes from learning to serve those at the absolute bottom, because the hardship training has forced you to realize you are fundamentally no better than them. The basement is mandatory. You cannot skip the grueling curriculum of the basement if you want to properly manage the penthouse without it destroying you.
And this brings us right back to you listening to this right now.
Yeah, exactly.
This isn't just an analysis of ancient historical texts or a recounting of one man's 20-year struggle with poverty in Korea. This framework is a lens for your own life.
Whenever you feel like you are losing ground, when you get passed over for that promotion, when your business venture collapses.
Or when you feel like you're being deliberately demoted by life and pushed out to the suburbs.
Right, you might not be failing at all. You might actually just be enrolled in the necessary hardship training to prepare you for your ultimate capability.
The descent is the preparation. The loss of status, the humiliation, the failure, it's all acting as a solvent, clearing out the fragile ego to make room for actual, unshakable substance.
Let's think back to that map we talked about at the very beginning. You've probably been spending all your energy trying to force your trajectory up, fighting and clawing against every single downward slip.
Which is completely natural.
It is, but think about the biggest frustration or roadblock in your life right now. The failure you are desperately, exhaustingly trying to climb your way out of.
Yeah, picture that specific thing.
What if you just stopped fighting it? What if that exact roadblock isn't an obstacle keeping you from your path? What if it is the precise dirt hole training ground you need to dissolve your ego so you can finally unlock the very thing you've been striving for?